Welcome. Thanks for coming. I'm Karen Armijos, and today I will be sharing with you my research on pedagogically hopeful fathers of children with Down syndrome lived experiences. I will start off by highlighting the importance of this research. Then I'll go on to put you through the method used in this study. Afterwards, I'll bring on the findings to finally end with a discussion and final considerations. I've got a question for all of us. When we were born, did our parents know that someday we will become scientists, musicians, nurses, researchers, athletes, or university professors? No, they didn't. But in most of the cases, did they help us to become what we are now? Of course they did. Exactly the same happens with people with Down syndrome. How do they achieve multiple desirable goals? Isn't it because of hopeful parents and educators? Brian Scott, who is a doctor, researcher, and brother of a woman with Down syndrome, wisely said, just as much as we don't know the full potential of children without Down syndrome, we don't know the full potential of people with Down syndrome. But what we know is true is that people with Down syndrome will succeed the most if their parents, their educators, their teachers, and their friends believe in them and provide them all the opportunities that will enhance the possibilities for that child. Parents are an essential pillar in the education of children, and their attitudes will affect them positively or negatively. Here comes into play pedagogical hope, which is an attitude rooted in the pedagogical love that an adult has for their children. This hope has the pedagogical adjective because it can only happen in a pedagogical relationship, which is a relationship that characterizes for having an adult who is always seeking the best or the greatest goodness for a child with Down syndrome. For example, parents who have this pedagogical hopeful, right, live these three convictions. They believe they can positively influence their children with Down syndrome, they trust in their capabilities, and they are attentive to their child's inner impulse to develop. Having explained this term, let's continue and see that until now, the majority of studies on parents of children with Down syndrome have mostly focused on mothers as the principal caregivers, thus leading to a lack of research on fathers. These studies on fathers have underscored that the cognitive function of children with Down syndrome will be favored by dyadic emotional interactions during play with their with fathers, right? Besides, fathers' perspectives of life was more positive after the child with Down syndrome was born, and that although experiencing a turmoil of negative thoughts at the first moment, after regaining hope, fathers perceived that their children with Down syndrome disabilities was a challenge rather than a tragedy. In this way, they were able to confidently cope. The contribution that our research has is that in our study, we believe that we can and should learn from fathers' pedagogical hope lived experiences, where they trust in the possibilities of their children and in the positive influence they can exert on their children through their hopeful attitude. Understanding fathers' pedagogical hope is paramount to the practice of strengthening our attitudes towards children with disabilities in parents, in educators, and healthcare professionals. For this reason, this research aimed to explore fathers' lived experiences and reflect on what it means to be a pedagogically hopeful father of a child with Down syndrome. But what exactly is a lived experience? Our everyday life is full of experiences. Most of them I take it for granted. This is to say, we don't usually stop and reflect what we live. I'll explain this better with an example. Now you're listening to me, right? And while you're all listening to my presentation, you're not thinking, what is it like to attend a World Down Syndrome Congress online, right? Now you're living this experience directly because you cannot reflect on it while you experience it. However, if tomorrow someone asks you, how was your experience? You can answer in two ways. Giving your opinion saying, oh, it was interesting. I learned a lot from all the speakers. Or you could deepen a bit more and say, oh, while the speaker was presented, I listened attentively and tried to follow her on the small box that she appeared next to the slides. I took a lot of notes, and for instance, there were moments that I felt like I was in the real Congress room with the rest of the audience, but suddenly my dog barks, the coffee machine sounds, and I found myself on my office room ready to take my cup of coffee while attending to the World Down Syndrome Congress. The second answer was very different than the first one, right? And this is because it showed the lived experience just as it was lived. It took us to the live world of someone who is attending a Congress, right? An online Congress. Well, as we aim to learn from the lived experiences or the live world of others, the method chosen was the hermeneutic qualitative phenomenological method by Max van Manen, who is a renowned pedagogue and phenomenologist. This approach allows the researcher to gain access to the lived experiences of participants, namely their pre-reflective experience of a phenomenon. Lived experiences are the raw material of phenomenology. And with this material, the researcher describes, interprets, and reflects on a phenomenon to understand it and bring it to life through writing in a phenomenological text. This text comprises the findings of the research, and its purpose is to promote the reflection in its readers, to make them capable of living and experiencing by themselves a phenomenon. In our case, the phenomenon is pedagogical hope, and with this study, we stop and reflect on fathers' lived experiences to become aware of their hope in their relationship with their children. In other words, the phenomenological research allows us to walk in the shoes of the participants, to learn firsthand what their experience of pedagogically hoping is like. The findings of this research invite us to reflect, maybe triggering in us questions like, why not me? Couldn't I, with my own way of being and my own circumstances, also live this pedagogical hope with my child? Before looking to the findings of this research, let's go now briefly to the fieldwork. Lived experiences were gathered from 10 fathers of children with Down syndrome who were from Ecuador, Scotland, and Spain. These fathers were purposefully and personally recruited after having a first conversation where we could identify that they demonstrated commitment. That means investing time and energy in supporting their child. Besides, the recruited fathers had a child who had made significant achievements in their particular context. 10 face-to-face phenomenological interviews were conducted in English or in Spanish, and after they were analyzed following the Max van Manen's theme analysis approach, where philosophical, philological, and human science methods were circularly used to get essential themes for the phenomenological text. The four themes in the phenomenological text obtained were: a pedagogically hopeful father is realistic, but a pedagogically hopeful father believes in the strength of his child with Down syndrome. A pedagogically hopeful father trusts in his positive influence, and a pedagogical hopeful father is open to unexpected surprises. Unfortunately, I won't be able to present all the phenomenological text in this length of time that I have to talk, right? But from these four topics or from themes, I would like to highlight that we should focus that the phenomenological text and the life experiences presented on the findings are or provide us hints, right? Hints of this phenomenon, hints of phenomenon of pedagogical hope. And those hints or those clues give us an idea of how to live it. For example, I would like to underscore that a common idea or a core idea of pedagogical hope is that as educators, fathers are like a farmer, right? I mean, in which way? a father doesn't know when the crops, right, will be harvested, but he keeps irrigating, right, with eagerness. So they have their little plant, their little child with Down syndrome, but they keep right. They're providing support, providing opportunities. They don't know when the child will come up with a result, right, or with an outcome. But that pedagogically hopeful father continues and continues and doesn't surrender. So this is just like a previous idea of pedagogical hope, but let's see now, right, from all these four themes here today, we will just deepen in one of them. And as a lived experience is worth 1,000 words, let's go on and see one of them. First, we will listen to the lived experience narrated, right, together with images that have been used to have a visual support. And after listening to this experience, we will read the extract of a phenomenological text. Let's see.
My son John is 5 years old and has Down syndrome. Every day, I happily go with him to school. There is an area with stairs at the school, which we pass by every day before going to the classroom. John likes to stop there and go up and down the stairs. I don't prevent him from doing it. On the contrary, I encourage him because this helps him to develop his coordination skills. At first, he wouldn't go alone, so I held his hands and he would go up little by little. I would go behind him, holding him and giving him the support he needed with my hands to go up and down. A month later, he started going upstairs more securely, although he was still holding on to me with his little hand. Then, after several weeks, he dared to go alone without my help, although he would use the railing or wall for support. He's doing very well at going upstairs, and he says, "Dad, let's go up 2 stairs at a time." Then I go up with him. Then he says, "Now, Dad, let's go 3 at a time." And there I go, upstairs with him. Going downstairs is a bit more difficult, but he still likes it, because we play while we are going down. I say, "Come on, John, jump!" Then I jump forward, and he jumps to my side. Meanwhile, we laugh, we make jokes, and have a good time together. In the end, I'm convinced John is going to do it. These days, he goes up and down alone, although he still does it somewhat awkwardly. But he's doing it. While we play, deep inside, I'm convinced that he will do it, and I say to myself, he will do it. I don't know when, but he will. And then, he will run down. I'm pretty sure of that.
After listening to this lived experience, let's go now and read extras from the phenomenological text. This father is not an illusory dreamer. He thoroughly knows John's limits, but he does not give up. Instead, this father proposes creative challenges to his son, saying, "Going downstairs is a bit more difficult, but he still likes it because we play while we are going down. I say, 'Come on, John, jump!'" His hope is rooted in a realism that sees difficulties as possibilities, because pedagogical hope does not automatically change difficult situations. Rather, it infuses these situations with meaning. Thus, this father goes beyond his child's handicaps and believes in his inherent capabilities. He states, "Deep inside, I'm convinced that he will do it." And I say to myself, "He will do it. I do not know when, but he will." And then he will run down. This profound conviction allows him to act patiently and take time. This father keeps trying because is convinced that sooner or later John will be able to do it. This father also enthusiastically supports his child, saying, I go behind him, holding him and giving him the support he needs with my hands to go up and down. Pedagogical hope is not pure optimism. It moves fathers to act, believing in the best and undoubtedly attainable future for his son or daughter. Well, after listening to this lived experience and reading this text, haven't we walked in the shoes of John's father? Here we have been able to capture and understand different nuances of pedagogical hope's realism. For example, taking into account the child's handicaps, probably, for example, John could have had like his motor skills not so maturely developed, right? So this father has this in consideration, but at the same time, he has a tireless patience, right? To see until what step his child can actually arrive. So here, right, however, we feel touched to some degree with this lived experience and their phenomenological text. John's fragment underscores that fathers' attitude toward their children with Down syndrome may benefit them. Thus, being a pedagogically hopeful father does matter in child reading. Exactly this is what our phenomenological research adds to knowledge. A better understanding of what it means to be a pedagogically hopeful father so we can remain fascinated by the attractiveness of what has been unveiled, right? Receiving a personal, ethical, moral, pedagogical invitation to transform into a better father, mother, educator, healthcare professional, or simply a better adult, right? A better adult who really seeks for the greater goodness for and of their child with Down syndrome. As final musings, I would like to share with you that we have looked in depth at intangible lived experiences of fathers' pedagogical hope. Fathers' lived experiences haven't provided us strategies or techniques that to follow, right? Instead, they might have triggered subliminally in us a reflection that might boost our hope and trust when interacting with our children. Having said this, it is important to mention that each person with Down syndrome is unique. His circumstances, his family, right, is unique. Thus, we should get from this research, as I previously said, we should get the core ideas of pedagogical hope: patience, realism, persistence, open to surprises, among others, that would help us to ask ourselves, why not me? Couldn't I live this attitude with my child, student, patient? Pedagogical hope is attractive, unique, and possible. Fathers in this research have showed us that pedagogical hope could break adults' preconceived barriers that impede autonomy and self realization in children with Down syndrome. Besides, it could open doors to children with Down syndrome and lead them to their maximum holistic development. This is their best version of themselves. People with Down syndrome teaches that they are important and valuable to our society. Thus, it is compelling to remain hopeful on their capabilities. As we haven't had enough time to present to you all the phenomenological text, right? If you are interested, you could look for this paper published in the Journal of Intellectual Disability Research, which is related to this presentation. So, thank you very much for your attention.